At exactly 2 o'clock a.m., the entire neighborhood security system collapsed, and the HOA president was on my roof with a paint roller humming opera. What she painted? My solar panels. What she broke? The system that kept everyone safe. And that was just the beginning. It was exactly 2 o'clock a.m. when my phone screamed like a banshee being waterboarded. Normally, I'd have thrown it under a pillow and mumbled something about raccoons, but that night something felt off. The lights on my bedside power strip were dead, the fan wasn't spinning, and in the distance I could hear the faint whir of a garage door attempting suicide. Maple Ridge Estates was under a full-blown digital blackout. Not the kind caused by a transformer, but the kind that made you wonder if someone somewhere just flipped a master switch and laughed. The gate camera? Offline. My security grid? Dark. The motion sensors? Frozen like a 2003 Dell running Windows Vista. I rolled out of bed, tripped over the dog, and headed for my backup server. The room greeted me with a blinking red light, the kind of blinking that says, "Hey, buddy, remember when you thought your neighborhood was safe?" I fired up the diagnostics. All solar input, 0. All live feeds, dead. All motion log timestamps stopped at exactly 12:07 a.m. My stomach turned. The solar panels on my roof had been running the surveillance backbone of our entire street for 5 years, ever since the HOA begged me to make the neighborhood feel less stab-worthy after a string of midnight break-ins. And now they were silent. Worse than silent. Cut off, which made no sense unless someone had physically tampered with the source. My first thought was maybe a squirrel committed spontaneous combustion again. It happened once, tragically. But when I pulled the roof cam footage from my off-grid storage drive, what I saw made me question reality. There she was, Karen, our HOA president, in full leopard print leggings, neon visor, and a tennis sweatshirt 2 sizes too small, standing on my roof with a paint roller in one hand and a ladder in the other. It looked like a deleted scene from the Real Housewives of Urban Insurrection. She wasn't in a hurry. No, she was, I kid you not, Ave Maria, while methodically coating my solar panels with thick beige paint, uniform strokes, top to bottom, like she was frosting a cake made of electricity. I paused the footage, blinked, rewound. Nope, still there. The timestamp, 12:14 a.m.ing. I zoomed in. The roller was dripping beige latex like it had just left a suburban cult ritual. I couldn't look away. It wasn't vandalism. It was performance art in the name of HOA righteousness. She even stopped midway to take a selfie, one leg raised like Captain Morgan, smiling like she just cured suburban blight. I opened my HOA app, and there it was, her post, timestamp 12:45, IMMing, captioned, improving the community, one eyesore at a time. Beige is best. Visual harmony. No more space tech vibes. By sunrise, every smart device on the block had a migraine. Sprinklers went rogue. One garage door crushed a trash can like it owed money. Mrs. Chandler's Chihuahua escaped through an auto gate and was found harassing ducks at the park fountain. The police, who had chased a bank robbery suspect through our neighborhood just hours before, called me to ask why every security feed in Maple Ridge went black during an active pursuit. Had no answer, except that Karen, bless her HOA soul, had declared war on solar technology and accidentally murdered our entire defense grid with beige latex and smug smile. I wish I could say I waited until a reasonable hour to confront her, but after reviewing the footage of Karen treating my solar array like it was a Crayola crime scene, there wasn't a force on earth that could have stopped me from marching to her door at 6:13 a.m. Not even caffeine. She answered in a pink satin robe, hair in curlers, and holding a cup of something that definitely wasn't coffee. She looked delighted, which was unsettling. Before I could open my mouth, she held up a finger like she was conducting a symphony and said, "You're welcome, Ryan. The roof was bringing down the whole block's energy. I mean that literally and aesthetically." I blinked. "You vandalized my roof," I said. She shook her head and said, "No, I beautified it. HOA code discourages high glare surfaces. Your panels were creating what I call visual discord." At that point, I wasn't even mad. I was emotionally congested. She spoke about my solar system like it was a landscaping mistake. I tried to explain calmly that the panels weren't just for my house. They powered the security infrastructure for the whole street, cameras, sensors, emergency relays, all of it. She laughed like I just told her I moonlighted as Batman. Ryan, she said, no one approved that. You can't just go host a neighborhood tech without a vote. That sounds very Silicon Valley dictator. I pulled out my phone and showed her the footage, her on my roof in full Karen regalia, paint roller in hand, humming like the ghost of HOA past. Her smile faltered for half a second, then returned with upgraded smugness. Cute edit, but deepfakes are a problem these days, you know. I wasn't surprised she denied it. Karen's greatest superpower wasn't manipulation. It was unshakable delusion dressed up as community service. She deflected, then attacked. Textbook. Claimed my system was an unauthorized experiment, that I had endangered the community by not getting proper visual integration approval. She pulled out a folded copy of the new HOA guideline pamphlet, fresh off her home printer. It had a beige cover, obviously. Inside, under Section 4, Aesthetic Uniformity, she'd added a handwritten clause: all rooftop installations must align with HOA-approved pallets, sand, bone, light bone, slightly off-white. It was initialed with a K that looked like it had been drawn by a toddler with a superiority complex. Beige, she said, is unifying. The weirdest part? She wasn't entirely wrong about one thing. The original contract giving me authorization to run the system, that wasn't public. It was buried in a dusty binder signed 5 years ago by a board that no longer existed, a board she had replaced one member at a time through voluntary resignation. Still, I knew I had a digital backup somewhere. I thanked her for the conversation, turned around and left before I said something that might have triggered a surprise code violation about my grass height or mailbox posture. But even as I walked away, her final words echoed behind me. By the way, Ryan, the HOA doesn't appreciate rogue tech influencers. I wasn't sure she meant that as an insult or a nickname. Back in my house, I went straight for the locked fireproof cabinet in my basement where I kept all HOA correspondence. I expected a quick win, flash the old contract, rally the neighborhood, paint Karen into a bureaucratic corner. But when I opened the cabinet, my stomach dropped. The folder was gone. In its place, a single sheet of paper, typed, unsigned, no letterhead. It read, "The solar surveillance agreement has been terminated and is no longer recognized by the HOA board." The formatting looked clean, too clean. I hadn't written it, no one else had access, unless someone had been inside. And if Karen went this far to erase the paper trail, I had to wonder, what exactly was she trying to keep from being seen? I didn't sleep the rest of that night, not because I was scared. I've dealt with outages, glitches, even a squirrel short-circuiting an entire panel row once. No, this was different. This wasn't nature or chance. This was sabotage with a motivational hashtag. And the fact that the only trace left behind was a forged memo in Microsoft Word font and not so subtle beige propaganda told me this was more than a turf war. It was a hostile HOA takeover. I booted up my offline backup drive. The nuclear option, a dusty terabyte relic that hadn't been touched since I last rage quit the HOA group chat over a debate about shrub height ratios. I'd scanned everything 5 years ago. The original contract, signatures, even emails with the old treasurer, Nora, who left the board mysteriously after losing her passion for parking regulations. But when I searched for the contract folder, all I found was an error message. File corrupted, ransom request, $2,500, 0 cents in Bitcoin. Karen had escalated from HOA dictatorship to HOA cybercrime. She didn't just delete the evidence, she ransomwared it. That wasn't petty anymore, that was felony level HOAing. And somewhere between the forged memo and digital hostage situation, it hit me. She'd known all along what those panels did. She hadn't painted them out of ignorance or aesthetic sensibility. No, she did it because they stood in the way of her next move, whatever that was. I leaned back, stared at the blinking cursor, and muttered, "She beige-bombed my firewall." My dog sneezed like he agreed. There was only one option left. I needed a physical witness, someone who knew what the board approved back then, someone still in town. And then I remembered Phil. Bill Connors, not the weatherman, was the former HOA vice president before Karen staged her beige revolution. He lived 3 streets down, owned exactly one Hawaiian shirt, and quit the board after she tried to fine him for having a non-regulation bird bath. I found his old number and called, no answer. I called again, still nothing, so I texted, Karen just killed the grid. You remember the solar contract? 3 minutes later, he called back. No hello, just a gravel voiced, you've got my attention. Phil sounded like he'd been waiting for this call since the HOA turned his porch flamingos into a zoning violation. He confirmed the contract had been legit, that Karen had been gunning for control long before she was elected, that she'd run a quiet campaign of reshuffling subcommittees, rewriting bylaws, and bullying the board into resignations. You think she's chaotic, Phil said, but she's strategic chaos, biche with a battle plan. The next morning, the flyers appeared. Dozens of them zip-tied to mailboxes, slid under doors, tacked to community boards. Warning, illegal servants in Maple Ridge. The layout was designed like a public service bulletin, red bolted fonts, blurry screenshots, and ominous claims about an unnamed resident spying on families through unauthorized technology. No name, but everyone knew who it was aimed at. My mailbox even had 2 copies. Karen was flipping the narrative. I was the dangerous one now, the creepy solar guy with cameras on his roof, hoarding footage of kids playing in yards and dogs pooping on sidewalks. It didn't matter that I had spent years building a system to protect everyone. She weaponized fear faster than I could upload a PDF. One neighbor, Mr. Talbot, actually asked if I'd installed facial recognition on the hummingbird feeder. For the first time, I realized this wasn't about proving I was right. It was about surviving the HOA smear machine. I needed more than just testimony. I needed receipts, real ones, budget reports, transaction logs, something that could show where the HOA funds went after Karen took over. Because if she spent money replacing my system with something she controlled, I could nail her for fraud or misuse of funds, or God willing, beige abuse in the first degree. But before I went digging, my phone buzzed. It was Officer Grant, same guy who'd called me the night of the blackout. Hey, he said, we need to talk. You're not the only complaint I've received about Miss Karen this month. I froze. About what? There was a pause. Unauthorized data collection. We think she's running her own surveillance network. And just like that, the HOA drama turned federal. Officer Grant's words stuck in my brain like a song lyric you didn't ask for. Unauthorized data collection, surveillance network, Karen. I sat there in silence, blinking at the beige horror I had just mentally unearthed. This wasn't just some HOA president with an aesthetic obsession. This was someone who weaponized vinyl siding regulations and community bulletin boards to hide what was starting to look like a full-blown covert intelligence operation, suburban edition. I thanked Grant, promised to forward anything I found, and hung up. Then I did what any rational man who just got framed for running a spy network would do. I went back to my basement. My fireproof cabinet sat exactly where I left it, double-locked, heavy, and totally disrespected by whoever had picked it clean. I opened it again, hoping I'd somehow missed something, that maybe the real folder had just slipped behind the lining or gotten stuck in some paperwork purgatory. But no, the contract was gone. The emails were gone. Even the thumb drive I kept with scanned PDFs was missing. Instead, I found a single USB stick labeled "Backup for Your Protection." The smiley face? That was what really sent the shivers. I plugged it in using a burner laptop I kept around for moments like this, and sure enough, it booted into a fake HOA portal with cheerful beige branding and a single statement. The HOA has restructured its policies to ensure community peace. Rogue technologies are being phased out. Thank you for complying. There was even a stock image of a family smiling in front of a beige picket fence, like it was the cover of Better Homes and Surveillance. The file directory included a folder titled Non-Compliance Risks, and when I opened it, I found blurry drone photos of neighborhood homes, including mine, with red circles and digital notes like unapproved panel angle, potential descent, and dog has barked past acceptable decibel range. Karen had created a watch list, a full-blown suburban watch list. I felt like I was in an episode of Black Mirror sponsored by Home Depot. That's when it hit me. If she had files like this on me, she probably had them on everyone. I needed a witness, sure, but I also needed insurance, hard copies, backups of backups, something Karen couldn't Photoshop or ransomware into oblivion. I remembered Nora, the former treasurer. She had always been meticulous, borderline obsessed with paper documentation. She once made a spreadsheet for a $12.00 lemonade stand reimbursement request. If anyone still had a physical copy of the original solar security contract, it was her. Only problem, she'd moved to Florida a week after Karen's HOA takeover, except I checked her old LinkedIn. No Florida activity, no retirement photos, just nothing. Her profile hadn't been touched in 4 years, like she'd disappeared. I texted the number I had saved under her name just in case. Hey, Nora, it's Ryan. Weird question. You still have any HOA documents from 5 years ago? I didn't expect a response, but I got one. 2 minutes later, just 5 words. If things go dark, run. I stared at that message like it was a ghost from the beige grave. If Nora was spooked enough to disappear, and Karen was bold enough to plant fake surveillance accusations on my mailbox, then something was seriously off the HOA reservation. And whatever she was planning or had already done was likely buried under a pile of fake forms, power wash bylaws, and that damn smiley face on a USB. But here's the thing about backups. I had one more. The original blueprints and encrypted storage schema for the security system were never shared digitally. I drew them by hand, annotated them in red ink, and stored them in a hollowed-out dictionary right between narcissist and nefarious. If Karen wanted to play this game like a Cold War thriller, I was ready. Except I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to burn her whole beige kingdom down. Starting with that storage shed, I waited until sunset, not because I'm dramatic, although I do appreciate cinematic timing, but because I needed cover. If Karen was running a private surveillance network out of the HOA's holiday decoration shed, I wasn't about to waltz in under full sunlight and risk being added to her noncompliance risks folder with a subtitle like, Suspect Displays Night Owl Behavior and Disobedient Posture. I called Joel. We'd gone to college together, bonded over broken firewalls and our mutual hatred of the phrase tech bro. He now worked cybersecurity for 3-letter agencies he couldn't name and moonlighted in digital locksmithing, which I'm 80% sure is code for legalish hacking. I told him I needed eyes and access. His response, does it involve an HOA Karen? I confirmed. He replied, be there in 40. Bring donuts. Joel showed up in flip-flops and a hoodie that said encrypt this, holding a tablet and an attitude. We parked 2 houses down from the community center and ran a passive network scan. Your HOA Wi-Fi password is literally horror arcs 123, he muttered. She deserves jail time just for that. He looped the building's front camera feed with footage from the night before. Karen doing her rounds in a beige tracksuit like she was patrolling a dystopian retirement village. We had a 5-minute blind window. Joe pulled a tiny fingerprint override tool from his bag, pressed it against the shed's biometric lock, and ran a script that looked like the Matrix having a caffeine seizure. 23 seconds later, the lock clicked open. After you, he said, like we were entering Narnia. Inside, it wasn't wreaths and candy canes. It was racks of sealed equipment crates, labeled with part numbers from a company I recognized, Verdantech, the same vendor I had sourced the original HOA surveillance gear from 5 years ago. Except this wasn't maintenance inventory. This was enough equipment to blanket the entire community in eyes, ears, and motion tracking. A hardwired server hummed in the corner, and Joel's scanner blinked. It's live, he said. In recording, I opened the most recent directory, dozens of video files, labeled by street, house numbers, even pet names. One showed the Thompsons' backyard, their 8-year-old daughter playing by the pool. Another showed a back-facing bedroom window at the Murphy's house, high angle, zoomed, way beyond anything HOA sanctioned. I clenched my fists. This isn't oversight, I said. This is voyeurism on a neighborhood scale. Joel scrolled to the config logs and found user entries labeled admin_K and observer1 under system notes. Phase 2 pending HOA vote override, set auto flag for uncooperative behavior. Karen wasn't just building a system. She was assigning behavioral scores, like we were all part of some Stepford-style credit rating for good citizenry. Joel turned to me, face dead serious now. Ryan, this isn't HOA business anymore. This is federal. We didn't take anything. We didn't need to. We photographed everything, exported server logs, and downloaded a full copy of the feed tree to Joel's encrypted drive. Then we locked the shed exactly the way we found it and left as quietly as we came. But the damage was done. Karen had gone from petty tyrant with a paint roller to a full-on data dictator. She wasn't just spying, she was compiling, sorting, and possibly selling resident data under the HOA's name. And the kicker? The HOA budget reports didn't show a single cent allocated to this upgrade, meaning the funding had either been funneled off the books or someone much higher up was backing her play. We sat in my living room afterwards, silent for a long moment. Joel finally said, "You know what this is, right?" I nodded. "Yeah, she's not doing this alone." He tapped the side of his coffee cup. "Then you've got two choices. Nuke her quietly with the law or blow it up so the whole neighborhood sees what she's really doing." I looked at the footage again. The camera pointed at the pool, the bedroom window, the living room through the blinds, and made my choice. "We're going public?" Joel grinned. "Good. Already prepped a presentation, and I added a slideshow transition called Karen's Downfall." I almost laughed. Almost. But deep down, I knew something darker. This wasn't just Karen playing house dictator anymore. This was a beige-wrapped blueprint for something bigger, and she'd only just begun. Word spread faster than a HOA violation notice taped to a mailbox. At 6:01 a.m., I didn't go to the official board. I didn't ask permission. I posted a message on the Maple Ridge community group chat, the same digital swamp where neighbors usually argued about whether wind chimes counted as aggressive sound art. This time I wrote, "Emergency community meeting tonight. Proof of surveillance abuse, HOA fraud, and privacy violations. This isn't drama. It's defense. Come if you care." I attached one blurry screenshot, Karen, mid-roll, on my roof, smiling like she just beheaded a piñata filled with federal crimes. By 6:45 p.m., the community center was packed tighter than a clearance bin at a Labor Day beige sale. People stood along the walls, others sat on folding chairs dragged in from the kitchen. Even the couple who hadn't shown up for a single HOA event in 12 years were there, holding hands like it was the finale of a true crime series. The tension? Palpable. Like a church potluck where everyone knew someone spiked the lemonade with truth serum. Karen arrived 10 minutes late, of course, wearing a sand-colored power blazer and holding a binder so thick it could have doubled as body armor. She smiled like someone about to sell you a house you already live in. "Thank you all for coming," she beamed. "I know change can be scary, but we're going to move forward into a brighter and more harmonious future." She clicked her remote and began her slideshow, before and after photos of houses with freshly trimmed hedges, color-corrected fences, and, you guessed it, my roof, now a featureless beige slab. Caption, "Visual unity, neutralizing neighborhood noise." I waited. Let her talk. Let her spin. Her voice was syrupy sweet, but the eyes behind those designer bifocals were scanning the crowd like a hawk, hunting HOA dissenters. Unauthorized installations removed for community clarity. It showed a zoom in of my original panels with a big red X over them. Below it, OCOA, thanks Karen for decisive action. I nearly choked on my complimentary cucumber water. That was my cue. I stood slowly, walked to the front, plugged in a flash drive, and let the footage roll. No commentary, just Karen, mid-squat, humming, Ave Maria, roller in hand, desecrating my solar panels like she was repainting the Sistine Chapel in Home Depot tones. The room went silent. Then came the slideshow. Server logs, timestamps, surveillance angles that showed backyard pools, bedroom windows, and private patios. Every clip had her system's fingerprint. Every file tagged and labeled like people were cataloged in some HOA Hunger Games. When it ended, I turned to the room. That system, it wasn't sanctioned. It wasn't in any meeting notes. But it was running, and it was watching. Karen stood, face pale but mouth twitching like it was still trying to find the right script. "This is absurd," she said. "These are test configurations. I was preparing to propose an upgrade. The footage was never meant to be permanent. I was trying to protect us." But she didn't sound so convincing anymore. Her voice cracked on, "Protect," as when a mother in the back, Mrs. Carter, stood and said, "Protect us? There's a camera pointed directly into my daughter's window." A murmur of outrage swept the room. A teenage boy raised his hand. "Yeah, and why does your server have a folder labeled behavioral deviations with my dog's name in it?" Erin lost it. She slammed her binder shut and shouted, "You people don't appreciate what I'm doing. I'm the only one keeping this place from turning into a garbage-strewn free-for-all." That's when Mr. Wheeler, our 83-year-old retired judge, who normally slept through meetings like a tranquilized sloth, stood and said in perfect courtroom voice, "I motion for a formal community vote of no confidence in Karen's leadership." Pause. Then an explosion of hands shot up. Even her two loyal lap dogs from the landscaping subcommittee voted against her. One of them muttered, "I just wanted free mulch, not martial law." As Karen grabbed her binder and stormed out, someone shouted, "Hey, Karen, HOA stands for Hands Off America now." Another neighbor whipped out a Sharpie and scrawled, "Be banished" on the meeting whiteboard. A kid started chanting, "No more beige, no more beige," and like something out of a high school pep rally, the entire room joined in. Karen didn't say another word. She just walked out, tight-lipped, hair slightly frizzed, like a villain in a Hallmark movie whose backstory nobody cared about. But as I looked around the room, neighbors clapping, hugging, forwarding footage to each other, I felt something else, unease. Because Karen hadn't begged, she hadn't threatened, she hadn't cried, no last-ditch drama, just silence, calculated, simmering silence. And I knew in my gut she wasn't finished, not by a long shot. The war wasn't over. She'd just lost a battle. And somewhere out there, her next move was already loading, probably in bays. 2 days after the meeting, a padded envelope landed in my mailbox. No return address, no postage, just my name typed, centered, and underlined. Inside was a flash drive and a single note scribbled in shaky penmanship. "You won the meeting." But she wasn't working alone. There are moments where your stomach just drops, like when you realize you've been smiling at a security camera you didn't install, or when someone leaves you a mysterious drive like you're the protagonist in a low-budget espionage film. I plugged it into a sandbox system. No way was I giving Karen's possible revenge drive access to my real computer, and opened the contents. It was a spreadsheet, thousands of rows, HOA names, board members, emails, purchase orders, vendor list, and one tab labeled Shared Surveillance Contracts Phase 2. Right there in cell C12 was a line that read, Maple Ridge Estates, Karen H. Status, pilot complete. The vendor listed, VerdantSec, the same company from the equipment we found in the shed. But it wasn't just us. There were 17 other neighborhoods listed, spread across the state, all flagged as in progress or pending HOA override. Some names I recognized, others had notations like City Council Ally on board or Media Containment Strategy drafted. This wasn't Karen freelancing, this was Karen implementing. I sat back in my chair, stunned. She hadn't just been some egomaniac HOA tyrant with a Pinterest addiction and a beige fetish. She'd been a cog, no, a node in something wider, a network, a suburban experiment in soft surveillance run under the comforting umbrella of community improvement. And she almost got away with it. Worse, the system wasn't technically illegal, not yet. These were private neighborhoods, gated, governed internally, and if residents voted or agreed, even passively, to changes in policy, these data systems could be considered voluntary. That's the loophole. That's the weapon. I forwarded the contents to Officer Grant and the district attorney's office. Within an hour, I got a call. The DA's voice was sharp. "We've had rumors about HOA surveillance initiatives tied to city-level funding, but this is the first solid proof." They asked if I'd give a sworn statement. I agreed. Then the agent added one more thing. "Karen isn't new to us, but no one's ever come close to cracking her endgame. Until now." It gave me no satisfaction, only concern. Because if Karen was their pilot project, the beta test, what the hell was phase 2? That night, just before I went to bed, I heard a soft thud at the front door. I opened it and found a flyer taped to the glass. Black background, white letters, simple. It read, "You're being watched too, Ryan." No signature, just the VerdantSec logo in the corner. My lights flickered once and steadied, and somewhere in the neighborhood, a motion sensor clicked on, even though nothing was moving. I didn't sleep that night, not because of the flyer, though I'll admit finding a professionally printed threat in Verdana Bowl on my front door wasn't ideal bedtime reading, but because of what it meant. Someone knew I had the drive. Someone knew I cracked open the pilot program. And worse, someone wanted me to know they knew. I did a full sweep of my house. Every corner, vent, and light fixture. I even tore apart a decorative candle Karen once gave the HOA members as a community bonding token. It was hollow, empty, but the label read, "Scent, Compliance." Cute, real cute. I installed a fresh firewall, air-gapped every sensitive device, and updated my physical security like I was prepping for the HOA purge. The next morning, I walked the neighborhood just to get a read, and that's when I noticed it. Subtle changes. Mrs. Daniels across the street had pulled down her welcome friends flag and replaced it with a plain beige one. The Chin family's doorbell camera, which had been powered by the same solar feed I built, was gone, uninstalled. A neighbor I barely knew muttered traitor when I passed, and two others crossed the street like I was contagious. Fear works fast, and misinformation spreads faster than crabgrass. By noon, I found a post on Nextdoor. Why did Ryan really have so many cameras? Was this ever about safety? One reply simply said, "You can't spell surveillance without Ryan." Another comment read, "Just because Karen was wrong doesn't mean he's right. Be careful who you trust." That's when I realized Karen may have lost the vote, but she hadn't lost the narrative. She'd planted it, like an HOA clause. Deep, quiet, waiting to activate. Her greatest trick wasn't just surveillance. It was plausible paranoia. She didn't need people to trust her. She just needed them to distrust me more. That night, Phil, the former VP, called. "You made enemies," he said. "Real ones, not just petty, lawn-measuring psychos." He warned me that HOA politics weren't local anymore. Some of these boards, he said, are being targeted by firms trying to install their people into neighborhoods, fake compliance experts, friendly consultants. Then suddenly your mailbox is under biometric control, and Alexis HOA, and I asked how far it went. He just said, "Farther than you'd sleep well knowing." I hung up and looked out my front window. Across the street, Karen's house sat dark, empty, but not abandoned. Her mailbox had been cleared. The porch swept. The trash bins taken in. It was like someone was still tending it, ghost style, and that's when I saw it. A white SUV idling 2 blocks down, lights off, parked just slightly too long. I grabbed my binoculars, the good ones, not the bird-watching ones, and zoomed in. The plate was a rental. The driver wore sunglasses. At 9:45 p.m., I took a photo, but before I could blink, the SUV pulled away. No screech, no panic, just calm, like it was done watching for now. My inbox pinged, a new message. No subject line, no sender, just an image attachment. I opened it. It was me, standing in my living room, from inside the house, from a new angle, higher, like it had been mounted recently. And in that moment, I realized Karen's surveillance empire hadn't collapsed. It had evolved, and somehow it had followed me home. Sometimes the real threat isn't the camera you can see. It's the silence behind the ones you can't. Karen may have been exposed, removed, even charged, but the system she helped build didn't vanish with her resignation. It revealed something deeper: how easily people will trade privacy for peace, truth for aesthetics, and safety for control, especially when it's wrapped in beige and labeled as community standards. But here's the truth: silence doesn't keep us safe. Oversight does. Accountability does. Good neighbors who speak up when something feels wrong, they do. This story wasn't about HOA drama. It was about who gets to decide what's seen and what's hidden. So if you live in a neighborhood like mine, ask questions, check the fine print, and never assume the person holding the clipboard has your best interest at heart. But sometimes the real HOA stands for hands-off authority, and it starts with someone saying, "No more."